Well, I know you've been urging me, Camilla, and good morning, to be saying this for a very long time, and because I don't think you should run around constantly asking for everybody to resign over everything, but I think if we've reached the point where this government in opposition made a lot of very clear commitments, including in their manifesto, then promptly junked a lot of them and did different things in office, and has now arrived at a point where once again we are led to believe they will be putting up taxes on hard-working people, which is something that they said they wouldn't do, then yeah, I think it's time for her to step aside, I'm afraid.
All right, so when should she step aside? Thursday, Wednesday afternoon?
Well, I leave that to for others to think about, but I think a position does finally become untenable if you go into a general election saying that you're not going to put up taxes on hard-working people, that you then do that, because that's what National Insurance on Employers actually did back in October of last year. Then you have an emergency budget in the spring, in March, and you say that's it, end of, we're not going to be coming back for more, and so on, not putting up taxes on hard-working people. And then another 6 months later, that appears to be exactly what you're going to do. I'm afraid there is a limit, I think, to everybody's patience in those circumstances.
Picture this. You are the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the person holding the nation's purse strings, and you decide that the best way to rebuild Britain is to take a giant, tax-shaped sledgehammer to the local pub. You walk into the House of Commons, adjust your glasses, and announce a budget that effectively tells every landlord in the country to pay up or pack up. Then, when the entire hospitality industry, from the smallest village local to the legendary Jeremy Clarkson, unites in a chorus of pure, unadulterated rage, you try to fix it with a 15% discount that has all the substance of a half pint of shandy in a hurricane. It is not just a policy failure, it is a full-scale political car crash that has left Labour MPs being barred from their own local boozers. If there was ever a moment that defined the phrase out of your depth, this is it. Quick favor, if you're loving this unfiltered deep dive into the crumbling facade of the Labour front bench, hit that subscribe button right now. Over 92% of our viewers haven't yet. And honestly, seeing that number go up is the only thing that keeps us from weeping into our lukewarm ale. It's free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now, back to the show. The headlines today, February 3rd, 2026, read like a series of increasingly frantic apologies. Earlier this week, the Treasury confirmed a massive U-turn. Pubs and music venues in England will get a 15% cut to their new business rates bills starting from April 1st, followed by a 2-year freeze. On paper, Rachel Reeves wants you to think this is a glorious rescue mission. She stood at the dispatch box and basically expected a standing ovation for backing British pubs. But let us look at the geopolitical reality of the average bar stool. The reaction from the actual pub trade has been about as warm as a discarded kebab on a rainy Saturday night. In Telford, the 18th century Golden Ball Inn did not just disagree, they went for the jugular, calling the U-turn political theater and an illusion of good news. You see, the Treasury's support package is a bit like your mate offering to pay for a packet of salt and vinegar crisps after he has just accidentally driven your car into a lake. While Reeves is boasting about a 15% discount, she is quietly ignoring the fact that she has already hiked employer national insurance contributions from 13.8% to 15% and slashed the secondary threshold from £9,100 to just £5,000. For a typical pub, that is an extra £2,500 in costs for every single full-time staff member. The Golden Ball Inn's Facebook post said it best, dressed up help while quietly strangling an industry already on its knees. They have warned that unless something dramatically changes, we can kiss goodbye to many of our favorite boozers. It is an unworthy and cruel trick that treats the British pub, the heart of our communities, like a disposable asset on a spreadsheet. The irony here is thicker than a London fog. Reeves is claiming to restore pride in our communities, while her policies are simultaneously driving the cost of doing business into the stratosphere. She is presiding over a system where for every £3 spent in a pub, £1 goes straight to the tax man. And yet, she thinks a 15% tweak to business rates is going to stop the rot. It is not a policy, it is a performance. It is a distraction from the fact that her first budget in late 2024 set a match to the hospitality sector's profit margins, and now she is trying to put out the fire with a water pistol. And then there is the Jeremy Clarkson factor. You know you have truly messed up when the man who turned sheep shearing into a primetime soap opera decides you are public enemy number one. Clarkson has famously banned all Labour MPs from his pub, The Farmer's Dog, in Burford. Why? Because he has seen his annual business rates bill rocket from £28,000 to well over £50,000. That is not a tweak. That is an eviction notice. He told the press, I was well ahead of the curve when I banned Starmer. Every Labour MP is barred now. He is not alone. Over 1,000 pubs across the country have reportedly joined the No Labour MPs movement. It is a symbolic move, sure, but it speaks to a deeper truth. The forensic Keir Starmer and his chancellor have lost the room. They campaigned on change, but the only change people are seeing is the extra pound being added to their pint to cover the government's tax raid. When Jeremy Clarkson bars you, you have lost the Middle England narrative. You have lost the farmers, you have lost the publicans, and you have lost the people who just want to have a quiet drink without a Treasury official reaching into their back pocket. It is a disaster of optics, a disaster of economics, and frankly, a disaster for anyone who actually likes a social life. The government's response has been to call these bans cancel culture, but the publicans are calling it survival. James Fowler, the landlord who started the movement in Dorset, says the chancellor took no notice of the plight of businesses before dropping her budget bombshell. This is not about being snowflakes. It is about the fact that if you tax a business until it cannot afford to turn the lights on, it closes. It is not rocket science, even if the Treasury's models suggest otherwise. When celebrity chefs like Tom Cridge are pleading for a VAT cut to 10% just to keep the industry's head above water, and the chancellor responds with 15% off business rates, the disconnect is staggering.
I am absolutely solid on the fact that it could be a man or a woman. It makes no difference. This isn't a question of gender. It's a question of economic competence. And I think all this mansplaining business is a bit of chaff. It's a bit of a distraction to try and get away from the basic facts, which we've got unemployment at a 5-year high. We've got anemic, flatlining growth. We've got inflation that's almost double the level it was under us, and we've got an economy that's in a very bad position, saddled up with debt, and we're paying 100 billion a year just on servicing that debt at the moment. And yet this government's going out and borrowing more money and spending more money and driving up inflation and putting us in a very precarious situation.
Now, let us talk about what the industry actually asked for. Landlord Gary Meads told the press that the biggest way to help the industry would be a simple reduction in VAT rates. It is the one lever that would actually lower prices for customers and give businesses some breathing room. Was there any mention of a VAT reduction this week? Not a whisper. Instead, we got this business rates U-turn, which is effectively a sticking plaster on a severed limb. By refusing to touch VAT, Reeves is signaling that she is more interested in the theater of a U-turn than the reality of survival. The 15% discount is a half-pint measure. It does not address the core problem, the constant layering of cost that is making the British pub an endangered species. According to industry leaders, nearly one pub closed every single day in 2025. That is 378 communities losing their heart and soul in a single year. If that is progress, I would hate to see what failure looks like. Rachel Reeves managed to annoy everybody by boasting about lower rates, while her policies were simultaneously driving the cost of doing business into the stratosphere. The devil is in the detail, as they say, and the detail here is grim. The 15% relief explicitly excludes restaurants, cafes, and hotels. It only applies to pubs that allow drinking without a meal. So, while Reeves claims to save the high street, she is actually creating a bizarre hierarchy of hospitality where your local curry house or coffee shop gets absolutely zero support, while their national insurance bills skyrocket. It is a disjointed, chaotic approach to economic management that has left the fragile ecosystem of our nighttime economy in absolute tatters. Is this unbelievable mistake enough to warrant a resignation? In the world of UK Unfiltered, the answer is a resounding yes, not just because of the pubs, but because of the pattern. We have seen a series of humiliating climb downs, from the winter fuel payment fiasco to the welfare cut U-turns. A chancellor who cannot get her primary fiscal event right the first time is a chancellor who is out of her depth. She has been accused of inventing a black hole to justify tax hikes, only for the Office for Budget Responsibility to reveal the outlook was rosier than she let on. She is governing by bait and switch. She creates an illusion of help while the high street burns. As the owner of the Golden Ball warned, the revised business rates are a distraction from the fact that the government is shafting our industry. When you lose the trust of the pubs, you lose the trust of the nation. It is time for Rachel Reeves to realize that you cannot fix an economy by taxing the very things that make British life worth living. The political theater has had its final act, and it is time for the Chancellor to take her bow and exit stage left. The sheer magnitude of this failure is hard to overstate. We are talking about the heart and soul of British communities. When a pub closes, it is not just a business that vanishes, it is a social hub, a local employer, and a piece of our national identity. Reeves's unworthy and cruel approach has left the hospitality sector in a state of drastic decline. She is treating the British boozer like a cash cow that can be milked until it drops. Consider the impact on the national living wage hike. It is going up to £12 and 21 pence an hour. Now, everyone wants people to be paid a fair wage, but you cannot mandate a 6.7% pay rise and a 54% increase in national insurance contributions and expect businesses to absorb the cost through a 15% business rates discount. The math simply does not work. It is spreadsheet governance that ignores the economic reality of a 40-year industry veteran like Ellie Sainty, who says this is the worst she has ever seen taxes on our industry. She calls it a willful destruction and a very personal attack, and she is right. Rachel Reeves spent months talking about a 22 billion pound black hole. It turns out the only black hole she is truly worried about is the one she is creating in the hospitality sector's profit margins. The Treasury claims this 15% discount will save the average pub around £1,650 a year. Meanwhile, the increase in employer national insurance and the hike in the national living wage will cost that same pub tens of thousands of pounds. It is like the government giving you a fiver and then taking your wallet, your watch, and your shoes. Landlords across the UK are pointing out that this is a bait and switch for good publicity. They are being asked to pay the gap while competing against online giants that the government refuses to tax effectively. The common sense approach would be a fundamental reform of the business rate system, something Labour promised in their manifesto. But instead of reform, we get tweaks and tapers. We get a chancellor who is clear-eyed about the spreadsheet, but totally blind to the high street. The new high street strategy is being hailed as the savior, but it includes opening hours extensions for the World Cup. Really? That is the big plan? Letting people stay in the pub until 2 a.m. for a football match once every 4 years is not a strategy. It is a gimmick. It does nothing to solve the constant layering of costs that Green King CEO Nick McKinsey warned would be the tipping point for the industry. When a company that oversees 2,600 pubs tells you the industry has been let down, you should probably listen. She's too busy rehearsing her next political theater performance.
So I think, look, there's a very different set of circumstances. Rachel Reeves has been the author of her own misfortune. It was her who chose to load a load of taxes on businesses and kill growth. They talked down the economy, they borrowed and spent a lot of money, which has driven up inflation and interest rates, and it's therefore no surprise we've ended up in this parlous situation. The situation during the last few years of the last Conservative administration were that we had COVID, which shrank the UK economy by over 10% overnight. You'd have to go back to the Great Frost of 1714 to have had any sign of that kind of shock hitting our economy. And of course we had the Ukraine-Russia war that put up inflation at the back end of 2022 to over 11%, and we had to bring that down. So nobody at that time was suggesting we shouldn't have been spending the money we were on supporting millions of jobs and households up and down the country. We did that, and we did it, Camilla, on the back of our previous record of having got the deficit.
As we sit here in February 2026, the data is in. One pub a day is disappearing for good. Not just closing temporarily, but being demolished or converted into nurseries and offices. Once they are gone, they almost never return. This is the legacy of Rachel Reeves' first 18 months in the Treasury. She has overseen the slow erosion of local culture while preening at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The Golden Ball Inn was right. The announcement was an illusion. It was designed to quieten a developing riot behind the taps, but the publicans can see through the smoke and mirrors. They know that a 15% discount on a bill that is already doubling or tripling is a joke. They know that the permanently lower rates Reeves boasted about are a technicality that does not reflect the economic reality of their bottom line. Let us look at the multiplier game. Reeves boasted about the lowest tax rate since 1991 inches for small businesses, but that multiplier is being funded by charging a higher rate on online giants and distribution warehouses. Again, sounds good on a campaign poster, but in reality, many medium-sized pubs, the ones with a rateable value over £51,000, are being hit by the higher multiplier too. That is 60% of the hospitality premises in the UK. So while she is backing the smallest pubs, she is quietly strangling the ones that actually provide the most jobs and revenue. It is a disgrace that treats successful businesses as enemies of the state. The No Labour MP's signs are not just a bit of fun, they are a warning. The silver vote and the working vote are noticing that this government is out of touch. They see a chancellor who is more interested in academic legal analysis than in the price of a pint. They see a prime minister who has completely exposed himself as a leader who prioritizes theater over integrity. If Rachel Reeves does not resign, she will become the anchor that pulls the whole labor ship under. The change they promised has turned into a disaster. From the Epstein stain on Lord Mandelson to the witch hunt against veterans, the scandals are mounting. But it is the attack on the local pub that will stick. It is the mistake that makes every voter look at their local high street and ask, is this the Britain I voted for? The Prince of Darkness may have run out of shadows, but Rachel Reeves is currently standing in the brightest spotlight imaginable, and she is blinking. She has made an unbelievable mistake, and the only way to fix it is a total change of direction, or a total change of chancellor. The political theater has had its final act, and it is time for the chancellor to take her bow and exit stage left. The sheer volume of closures is staggering. Government statistics show that over 7,000 pubs have disappeared since 2010, but the rate is accelerating under this administration. That is not just a number, it is job losses, it is farmers who have no one to sell their malt to, and it is brewers who have no one to sell their kegs to. It is a fragile ecosystem that is being systematically dismantled by a government that claims to support growth. You cannot have socially productive growth if you are taxing the places where people go to socialize out of existence. The absurdity reaches new heights when you consider the draft duty cut. Reeves loves to talk about a penny off a pint in the pub, but as the Campaign for Pubs rightly pointed out, this is a total fabrication. The cost increases imposed on pubs in the same budget, the national insurance hike, the wage rises, the alcohol duty increase on bottled beers and spirits, dwarf that penny by a factor of 50. It is like a mugger stealing your watch and then offering you a copper coin for the bus home. Pub goers are instead being served a 3-0 4-0 hike on their pint prices just to keep the lights on. It is a cynical, forensic attempt to manipulate public perception while doing real-world damage.
Different.
Also, I mean, when you talk about the difficulty of COVID, and we appreciate that, we appreciate furlough, there are many that think that Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, completely mismanaged it, and no mention at all of the billions of COVID loan fraud that we had to also shoulder the burden for economically.
And what about the Hospitality Support Fund? Another £400 million mentioned in Treasury briefings. Divided over 3 years, across thousands of venues, it is something and nothing, as the trade leaders say. It is a sticking plaster that can be withdrawn at any time. The reality remains that we have restaurants and hotels facing severe challenges from successive budgets. They need substantive solutions, not gimmicks about opening hours for the World Cup. They need a government that understands that the noble art of being a publican is part of our heritage. It is part of what makes the United Kingdom unique. And right now, it is under personal attack from a chancellor who seems to view the high street as a cash cow to be bled dry. But let us dive deeper into the U-turn on the U-turn. Just last week at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Reeves appeared to row back on even these concessions. When asked if she would consider additional support for hotels, restaurants, and cafes, she insisted. The situation pubs face is different. A Treasury official later clarified, this package is for pubs. It is a classic divide and conquer strategy. By giving a tiny crumb to pubs, she is hoping to quieten the most vocal critics while leaving the rest of the hospitality sector, the travel agencies, the high street bakers, the gyms, to rot under a 76% average rise in business rates bills. It is a betrayal of the small business owner. Let us talk about the Institute of Directors' reaction. Even the bigwigs are worried. They have pointed out that small firms across the rest of the hospitality, leisure, and retail sectors, from your local greengrocer and hairdresser to the nail bar or florist, will be incredibly disappointed to have been thrown no type of lifeline whatsoever. By losing the previous 40% discount and facing April's revaluation, many firms are looking at a death sentence. And yet, Reeves at Davos was busy telling global investors that Britain is a stable place to do business. Stable for whom? Certainly not for the person trying to run a cafe in Telford. The Golden Ball Inn landlord Gary Meads wasn't the only one calling for a VAT cut. The Liberal Democrats have joined the chorus, urging a 5% cut to tackle the unaffordable luxury that going out has become. They have proposed a £12 billion plan to slash prices for families. But Reeves is digging in. She is locked into a fiscal ideology that prioritizes tax receipts over economic vitality. She is punishing the very sectors that provided a morale boost to the nation after the pandemic. It is a perfect storm of trading circumstances, and the chancellor is steering the ship directly into the rocks. Consider the small business multiplier. It is frozen at 49.9p, but the standard multiplier is rising to 55.5. This means that larger venues, the ones that act as the main employers in their towns, are being clobbered. UK Hospitality reports that hotels are facing a 115% rise in rates. This is not targeted support, it is selective destruction. It is the willful ignorance of a treasury that thinks you can grow an economy by picking which businesses get to survive and which get to kiss goodbye to their patrons. The revised business rates are a classic illusion of good news. It is political theater designed for a 30-second clip on the evening news. But when the cameras go away, the reality is a £7,000 average rise in bills for pubs by 2028. It is a wholly inadequate response to a crisis that the government itself accelerated. As Dom Jacobs, a pub group managing director, put it, this failure will inevitably push many brilliant publicans out of business. In the grand scheme of things, Rachel Reeves has managed to unite the country in a way most politicians can only dream of. It is just a shame it is against her. From the scathing posts of 18th century inns to the social media bans from celebrity farmers, the message is loud and clear. You are not listening, and you are not helping. This unbelievable mistake has cast a stain over the government that number 15% discount can bleach out. It is time for a chancellor who understands that the heart of the community is more than just a line on a balance sheet. It is time for a chancellor who actually likes the British pub. Let us look at the Labour Knowsley MP, Annalise Midgley. She organized a letter signed by 50 Labour MPs, warning that these changes are not enough. When your own backbenchers are telling you that your major support package is woefully not enough, you know the wheels have fallen off. MPs like Stella Creasy and Justin Matters are seeing the catastrophic potential in their own constituencies. They know that if the local community hub closes, the social cost is far higher than any tax revenue gained. The Music Venue Trust is also sounding the alarm. Grassroots music venues, often the same premises as pubs, are facing rateable value increases of up to 275%. Even with a 15% discount, they are looking at a bill that will bankrupt them. These are the places where the next generation of British talent gets its start. By strangling these venues, Reeves is not just killing a business, she is killing the future of the UK's £6 billion music industry. It is short-sighted and culturally illiterate.
Well, good morning, Eamon. The Chancellor should resign. Now, Richard Hughes' departure, one can understand in terms of the serious errors that were made at the OBR, but nonetheless, I think there's more than sort of circumstantial evidence that the relationship between him and Rachel Reeves and the lack of support from the Chancellor for him at this particular moment has been part of the story of him leaving his position. But look, the real story here, not to get distracted too much by the OBR, is that of course the Chancellor called that press conference on the 4th of November, stood up and told the public that there was a huge great black hole in the public finances, and we now know, thanks to Richard Hughes and the information that he brought forward into the public domain on Friday, that simply was not true. That in fact the previous forecast that the OBR provided on the 31st of October had shown that actually she was in a surplus against her fiscal target.
And what about the National School Food Program or other social initiatives? Starmer loves to talk about them, but he is funding them by destroying the very small businesses that provide the local tax base. It is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Except Peter is a struggling landlord, and Paul is a government project that will likely be managed by a high-cost consulting firm. The change we were promised was supposed to be about fairness, but there's nothing fair about letting supermarkets and online giants pay lower proportional rates than a corner pub. The Taxed Out campaign in Southbourne is a perfect example of the grassroots revolt. James Fowler, the man who started the ban, said he spent 10 minutes explaining the pressures of the sector to Rachel Reeves just before the budget. He said she looked straight through me and threw out those extra taxes the next day. That is the forensic Starmer government in a nutshell. They hear you, but they do not listen. They have their plan, and if your livelihood gets in the way of that plan, well, that's just the price of progress. Wait, there's more. The Treasury is also raising the cost of an electronic travel authorization for visitors and hiking visitor visa fees. This is a staggering blow to the inbound tourism sector. We are telling the world Britain is open, while simultaneously charging them more to get here and taxing the pubs they want to visit into oblivion. It is a joined-up government that is joined at the hip to failure. As we conclude this deep dive into the Reeves recession, remember that the local pub is more than just a place for a drink. It is where we celebrate weddings, where we commiserate after a loss, and where we build the social capital that makes a country strong. By quietly strangling this industry, Rachel Reeves is tearing at the fabric of British life. She has made an unbelievable mistake, and the only way to fix it is a total change of direction, or a total change of chancellor. The political theater is over, Rachel. The pub is closed, and the public is calling last orders on your career. Thank you for watching UK Unfiltered. If you found this insight valuable, do not forget to share the video and join the conversation in the comments. We will see you in the next one. Would you like me to look into the secret Treasury memos that suggest even more tax hikes are coming for the squeezed middle? Let me know. Good day. Thank you for watching.